Tennessee, I think, should take some pride in that Joe Milton is ranked fourth among the quarterbacks in the SEC. I think that's pretty strong coming out of the gate. I think that's strong considering that Tennessee's own coaches didn't think that he would be the starter in 2021. I also think the Ole Miss thing rears its ugly head from time to time. But as far as quarterbacks that will be in the SEC East, should Tennessee be most concerned about Devin Leary, Spencer Rattler, or Carson Beck this season? So let me start with Devin Leary. What are your thoughts on Devin Leary? Should that be a concern for the Vols, and how big should it be a concern? We'll save that guy named Spencer Rattler, who was a concern last year in October or November in the Columbia collapse. We'll save him for last because I think he's obviously a concern. Devin Leary, your thoughts?
So I'm suspicious of Devin Leary because of the damage he did in the ACC in 2021, but I think it was in the ACC, so it's hard to know what to make of it. But so you question his competition. You also question his health. I mean, Dave, how many times have we seen quarterbacks or any position come back from an injury, and it's just they're never right after an injury again? And so I'm suspicious with that with Devin Leary. The thing that works in Devin Leary's favor that I think Tennessee should be nervous about is, again, Liam Cohen is back as Kentucky's offensive coordinator. And I think that's a huge deal for them because he's a genius offensive coordinator. You can say whatever you want about him, but he's a great offensive coordinator. And him being back in Kentucky is a huge deal. And I think that if Devin Leary is healthy and if he's right, Cohen's going to bring out the best in him. I mean, there's no way to debate that. Cohen is going to bring out the best in him. So that's why I think Tennessee should be scared of Devin Leary.
No, that's fair. Okay, so let's go to Carson Beck. Do we know much about Carson Beck to this point at all?
No, we just hear what Georgia's promoting about Carson Beck. And again, how many times Stetson Bennett was their best quarterback and he was the least promoted. Georgia's had, 5-star after 5-star commit since Kirby Smart's been there, and none of them have worked out. And then Stetson Bennett did. So I feel like the more hype a Georgia quarterback gets, the less we should believe in them at this point.
No, I think the Stetson Bennett thing still to this day is a funny thing to me. I mean, how well do you have to play in key situations to be considered an upper level quarterback? It's almost as if that guy's just never going to be considered an upper level quarterback no matter what he does. And the next guy coming in is going to have more talent and all this. And Carson Beck might be that guy, but we don't know that yet. And there's an intangible in being in the fourth quarter that I would take over arm strength. I don't know about you, any day of the week. I would take the intangibles and arm strength before I would take the tangibles of throwing the football 85 yards any day of the week. I'm sorry, the intangibles of fourth quarter play. Excuse me, I think I misspoke.
Yeah, I agree. I would absolutely take the intangibles and the arm strength in the fourth quarter. And we know Stetson Bennett had the intangibles, whatever else you want to say about him at that point. He had the intangibles. I mean, this is kind of need to go back in history a little bit. This is the going from T. Martin to Casey Clausen, isn't it? Now, I think you and I both agree that Casey Clausen had a better arm than T. Martin probably, didn't he? In terms of accuracy, much better arm.
Oh, accuracy, yes. I thought you were referring to arm strength. Yes.
Yes, much more accurate. But T. Martin did have like this kind of fourth quarter intangible thing where he, never really panicked with his team in 98, 99 and really rallied around them. And I think that, I think Clausen was a better quarterback, but I think T. Martin was able to rally his team just a little bit more than Casey Clausen. And you saw that. And you wonder if Stetson Bennett to Carson Beck is going to be like going from T. Martin to Casey Clausen in that way.
And the thing that always impressed me about T is you'd kind of forget he could run until he really needed to in the fourth quarter. Did you ever notice that? It just seemed like his best runs were in the second half or late in the game, and you kind of forgot that, hey, he was a runner, and indeed he was. So Spencer Rattler, how good can he be? So let's go 3 different levels. Let's go starter, good, all SEC, and then Heisman Trophy contender like Hendon Hooker was knocking on the door. He didn't get invited to Atlanta or New York, but Carson Beck, how good can he be if I gave you those 3 levels?
Carson, you mean Spencer Rattler, not Carson Beck?
Spencer Rattler.
Spencer Rattler has the talent to be knocking on the door of the Heisman Trophy. I'm going to be honest with you, like Hendon Hooker last year. However, he's got the worst offensive coordinator in the history of offensive coordinators coaching him this year in Dowell Gaines. And I thought Marcus Satterfield last year was bad. I mean, it took Marcus Satterfield until the end of November to realize how to use Spencer Rattler. That was embarrassing on its own. Dowell Gaines is worse, and I reserve all my disdain for him based on the time he became an offensive coordinator for the Titans in 2012 and 2013. I've never forgiven him for those 2 years, and him and Mike Munchak's constant belief in Jake Locker, which was just an embarrassment. And he's failed everywhere he's been as an offensive coordinator. He was with the Bears after that. He was with the Dolphins after that. He was with the Jets after that. Failed at all of those spots. And he's never been a college offensive coordinator. So I got zero faith in Dowell Gaines. I think Ray Goff, Tennessee should love the fact that Georgia hired Ray Goff. They should more love the fact that South Carolina hired Dowell Gaines.
Yeah, I still, from the college coaches I talk about, despite the finish that South Carolina had, which included that game against Tennessee, a win against Clemson, I still hear that college coaches are not very high on the assistant coaching staff that has been assembled there in South Carolina. I mean, maybe they're young guys who don't have friends in the coaching community, but right now, if you ask around in the coaching community, there's not a lot of great things that are being said, Caleb, about the assistant coaches on South Carolina's staff. Whereas I think Shane Beamer's goal is to grow himself into a Philip Fulmer, a really good recruiter, kind of a hip Philip Fulmer, so to speak, but worried about recruiting first. And he was a GA at Tennessee. But I don't hear great things about the staff at South Carolina. Whereas I thought Tennessee, if you want to make the Philip Fulmer comparison, had great coordinators, a great coordinator in David Cutcliffe, a good coordinator in John Chavis. I think Dan Brooks was defensive line coach. He was fantastic. Steve Caldwell was fantastic as well. There was a lot of questions about Larry Slade, who was the defensive backs coach at the time. On the offensive side, if you want to go back, you had Randy Sanders as the running backs coach, but essentially he was another quarterback mind, another OC type that was in the room. And then you had Pat Washington at the receiver position that I thought a lot of people had very understandable questions about. So, and I don't think that South Carolina's staff is even that good. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I don't see it right now.
Yeah, funny enough, the way Shane Beamer's doing it, a comparison that actually I think might be a little bit better is the last 2 years of Butch Jones at Tennessee and Derek Dooley when he was at Tennessee. And the reason I bring those two up is, didn't it seem like Derek Dooley was just hiring to hire and didn't really have an agenda or direction in his mind when he hired his staff during those years?
Well, he hired his buddy who hadn't been in coaching before. I thought that kind of said enough in Chuck Smith, and I'm not knocking Chuck Smith, but why would you go and hire a guy who's been in the NFL, was about to get let loose by the Jets, and was really like a specialist, a pass rushing specialist coach? To me, that was a monstrous red flag. Do you remember that hire at the time? Wasn't that odd?
Oh, I remember that hire. Yes. And then they had a bad falling out too after that. But yeah, I remember that one. And then there was also the Sal Sunseri hire, which I know that Tennessee was toxic at the time and nobody really wanted the job because they knew Derek Dooley was a dead man walking. But really, Sal Sunseri was where you went? You couldn't have gotten somebody better than that? And so, I mean, there seemed to be no thought. And then Butch Jones he forces out John Jancic to bring in Bob Shoop, who clashed with the defensive position coaches, and then half the staff leaves the next year. And Butch Jones again just throws a hodgepodge of people together, and Tennessee goes 4-8. I think Shane Beamer's doing that, not to that extreme, but he just doesn't seem to have an agenda behind. You're right. He seems to want to be hands off, hire a coach, and then just let them do their thing and have no idea of a direction he wants to go. At least Dabo Swinney as a CEO, he's like, I want a direction of this offense. I want to do the air raid now because nobody in the ACC is running it. So let me go get Garrett Riley to do it and run it. And he's thinking forward from that way. Shane Beamer was just throwing a hodgepodge staff together.
Yeah, I agree, and that's what the coaching community completely agrees with Caleb Calhoun when you ask about Shane Beamer. I mean, in the best of worlds, Shane Beamer is able to hire two great coordinators and ride this thing out, being a great recruiter. But there's some problems with that. I don't know that a great coordinator will want to work for Shane Beamer. I mean, the coordinator might be older than him, and I don't think they have the faith that he will be a great head coach slash recruiter. Do they know they're going to be working with top flight talent? I mean, when you came to Tennessee, when Philip Fulmer was the head coach, you knew that you were going to have top flight talent, right? That made a lot of these decisions a lot easier if you were going to make the move from another school. So I don't know that they have that now, and I don't know that they're ever going to have that under Shane Beamer. It's tough for him. It's kind of like he's pulling from both sides, Caleb, in terms of what he can be. Can he manage his team while still being the guy who is Bruce Pearlish, if I may say so, who is raw, let's go, but at the same time is one of the top recruiters in the nation? I think that's asking an awful lot of Shane Beamer right now. I feel like he's pulled in a ton of different directions.